guys. Home stretch.
Thank you.
Any questions from before? In the middle of the night, I know that something's going to hit you. Oh, okay. Those of you who are writing stuff down, write this down. It's called Self-Tech. S-E-L-F-T-E-C-K. All one word. It's a YouTube channel that I put out. In that channel, it has everything that I've talked about. Violations of love and trust, acting badly, finding truth. It also has on there something called the 4 steps, which is our strategy to how to get our pathway, a new pathway in our head. It also has a more extensive conversation about what I'm going to be talking about in regards to forgiveness. I have an interview with Ron Deal about step families on there. Getting ready to have one about perinatal depression. I think I told you that last night. Go to that YouTube video or YouTube channel.
What was it again?
Self-Tech, S-E-L-F-T-E-C-K, one word. And that's all. I also have a Facebook page on that. All right. Forgiveness. We know we're supposed to do it. The Bible tells us we're supposed to do it. I do think that in religious circles, it has misguided us in the process of how to do it because we're just told to do it. So what do? We think, okay, I know I've got to do it. I forgive you. So folks, it is not as easy as that. When you get down to the real rub of it, sometimes forgiveness can be what I call a love bomb, where it just goes, poof, it's all gone. You know, if I say something harsh to my wife, and it just really hurts her, and then I come back and I apologize sincerely, it's done. It's over. If someone has an affair, it's not so easy just to get over it. Domestic violence, it's not so easy to get over. Violations in regards to spending money, holding secrets, and all that type of stuff, it's not that easy. So the idea of just letting it go and get over it, we're going to challenge that. Sometimes we're either moving towards forgiveness or we're moving away from forgiveness. I often think of it, like I said, either the love bomb or it's like the game Pac-Man, where you a little bit, you go down the road, ooh, I still got to deal with this. You got to deal with it a little bit more. And that answers the question a lot of people have. I thought I was over this. I thought I had forgiven this. And it comes back and gets you again. You go, oh, I guess I haven't forgiven. Well, the answer is, yeah, you forgave to the point that you could, and then you went on, and you still had process to do that. That's giving yourself a lot more grace, I think, in understanding that forgiveness is a process. There are 4 stations that I'm going to identify for you. And even though I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, this is not a linear process. Much like you'll hear called the stages of grief, but even stages of grief by Kubler-Ross, people misinterpret it as then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and boom, you're done. And it's not like that. And the same thing with forgiveness. It's not like you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and this, and then, okay, now we're forgiven. We use the word stations to give the impression that you do this station, and then you might do this station, and then you might have to go back to this station, and maybe to this station. And so whatever station you are needing at the moment, that's where you need to go. But as you do that, you're moving forward in your forgiveness. The first one is called insight. insight. When Carol found out that Jim had been seeing somebody on the side of the opposite sex that was not necessarily physical, but they had been doing a lot of chatting, a lot of emotional connection. That was a violation of trust, and it hurt her deeply. Insight is understanding what the violation was. And the violation is deeper than him having that conversation. It is, what did that behavior say to her about her or her relationship? This goes back to the language of the pain. By him having those conversations, it made her feel like she wasn't important, she wasn't good enough, and she began to feel unsafe in the relationship. Insight, the person, I'm going to be using the words violator and violated. The violated needs to understand those messages. What was it? What did that behavior of the violator mean? That was the violation. Same thing with money. If somebody is squirreling away money, secret accounts, secret bank cards, credit cards, and all of a sudden that's found out. When that's found out, what is that message that is saying about you? It's more than I can't trust you, and because you can't trust that person, what does that mean about the relationship? And it means it's unsafe. I feel powerless to be able to reclaim that right now. That's the violation. We always just think about the behavior, but it's what the behavior represents. Now, when it comes to insight, the violator needs to be able to communicate with the violated that they get it. And they understand what the violation was, such as, if I were to have an affair on my wife and I wanted to try to move her towards forgiveness, I would have a conversation like this. I would say, Janice, I know that whenever I had this affair, it made you feel like you weren't good enough, that you weren't measuring up, you felt unloved and rejected, and I'm sorry. Now that's different than, I know I hurt you, please forgive me. Do you hear the difference? The difference is I'm speaking to her heart. I'm speaking to where the real injury is. It's not up here. It's not up here. I have heard too many violators who have said, I know I did this. Please don't make me repeat it again. And I know it hurt you. Please forgive me. That won't cut it. My experience has been until the violator is able to speak that directly into what the violation was and how it affected the violated, will that violated ever feel like they can move on? I've just heard that way too much. I have a husband and wife, and they have been trying to get over a violation for months. And he keeps telling her, he says, I've apologized for this. I've apologized for this. And that's what I'll ask. I'll say, how have you apologized? And he'll give me, I told her I was sorry. I didn't mean to hurt her. And she says, something's not right. And I'll ask her, do you think he gets it? And she'll say, no. And so I'll coach him to do exactly what I just did a little while ago. And he'll do that, and it's almost like she melts right there in front of me. And I'll ask her, do you think he gets it now? Yes. He understands. That's the insight part. Next part, Oh, by the way, insight also, in that particular station, you need to start making changes so that the offense doesn't happen again. One lady who was molested by her father when she was young, and it never got out in the family. She never told her mother. And now this woman grows up, she has children, and did I tell this story to you? Okay. I tell it so often. And she grows up, and her dad, the violator, is wanting to spend a lot of time with the grandchildren, especially all the kids, and she's got girls. And she's not feeling very good about this. She's never addressed it with her father. And every time that she tries to address it with her father, she can't get him alone to talk about it. He always kind of almost hugs his wife so that she can't get him alone. So with the help of the therapist, they came up with a plan. So when they had a family gathering, she said, "Dad, something's wrong with my car. I don't know what's going on with my car." The man comes up, "Oh, let me see what's going on." So he goes in, and he says, "What's wrong?" She goes, "No, you got to get in my car. It only sounds like this whenever we're driving." So he sits in the car, and they drive off. She's got him alone. He's hanging out the window trying to hear what's going on. And she said, "Dad, there's nothing wrong with the car. You know what you did to me. If I ever see you alone with my girls, I will tell Mom what you did." That took care of it. And he was never alone. And what she did at that point that helped her move towards forgiveness was she made sure it never was going to happen again. Okay? Next. Understanding. This station is hard because the violated needs to try to put themselves in the other person's shoes, the violators. Try to understand what in the world would have ever caused them to do this. When you do this station, you're moving from demonizing the person, the violator, to humanizing them. You begin, it's not to condone their behavior, but it's begin to understand. If you go to the prison outside of Amarillo and you talk to these guys, how many of those guys do you think had a nurturing father? None. How many of those sex offenders out there were also offended, had it done to them? The majority of them. Now that is not to condone their behavior, but it's so that you can go, I understand. I have compassion now for them. I don't have to blame them for this. And now I understand. Also what helps in this particular station is, in understanding, is you can go, well, you know what? I'm no angel. Let me count the ways that I hurt people. And when you recognize that you have frailties also, again, you are moving from demonizing this person to humanizing this person. One of my first ministries was in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And there was a lady there that was kind of the matriarch of the youth ministry. She had 5 boys. Did I tell you this story too? Okay. She had 5 boys, and they were all great boys. They've become doctors, dentists. They are great. But she was like the woman that no matter what youth minister came through there, she held it all together. Well, whenever I arrived, I knew who she was, and we got along famously. I was so glad to have her there. She was great. When my master's program, I developed a program that would help teenagers with self-esteem, and it demanded that they broke up in groups, and they had leaders. And so I was training leaders for this, And it was her idea to have this program, and after we got done training leaders, we realized that we had more leaders than we needed. And so she came to me and she said, "Wib, if you want to go ahead and use somebody else, you just go right ahead. I don't need to do this." I said, "Okay, thank you." That was the worst mistake I ever made. Because when I agreed to do that, unintentionally, man, I hit her pain. And she was terrible to live with for the next 4 years. She was probably a major reason why I ended up having to leave. Because I really liked the job. About 8 years later, 9 years later, I'm reevaluating some things in my life and people that I really need to forgive. There she was. And I asked myself, why in the world would she do that? And then I thought, that was her identity. That was how she got back. And even though it was unintentional, that's why she did it. She was hurting. That helped me just basically go, I'm through with that. I can get over it. These first two, insight and understanding, you need to do whether you're going to restore a relationship or not. There are some relationships that you can't restore. It could be because they're dead, they're gone, or they're not safe. If I have a next door neighbor who I thought was the best neighbor I could have, and I come to find out that they've molested my child, I know eventually I'm going to have to forgive that person, but I am not going to restore that relationship. They're not safe. I'm not going to do it. But if I'm going to restore a relationship, there's two more things that I've got to do. Because the third step, station, is what we call opportunity for compensation. That's a really terrible way of saying, let's rebuild trust. Here's how we rebuild trust. There are three things you need to have to rebuild trust. I mentioned them last night. We're going to expand on them. First one is predictability. Did I talk to you about? You have to bear with me. I take Prevagen, but I'm not sure it works real well. Did I tell you about the guy that had been beating up his wife? No. Good. Guy comes in my office, husband and wife. Domestic violence issue. He'd been beating up his wife for 10 years. I didn't show you. They come in, and I wouldn't ever do counseling unless the fact that he had not been doing it for 3 months. I said, okay, I'll work with it. We sit there, and about another month, 4 months, he comes in just frustrated. He says, what is wrong with her? I've been good for 4 months. And I said, 4 months. I said, how long have you been married? 10 years. Okay, now, in any given month, how many times would you beat up your wife? Well, at least once, maybe twice a month. Okay. And when you would beat her up, how bad would you beat her up? He said, well, I always left marks. So 10 years, twice a month, 240 times, you have beat your wife. In only 4 months you've behaved yourself, and you can't figure out why she doesn't trust you? You've got to be kidding. He held on for another week, and he left. He was gone. He couldn't. He was just whiting up to her. There wasn't any real chance. And she had every right in the world not to trust him. It takes anywhere between 85 to 93% of the time You need to be predictable to be considered trustworthy. So that means if you only yell and scream at your spouse 1 out of 10 times of conversation, that may be they can build trust, but that's a really high percentage. 85 to 93%. If you're a rager, that's just as important. You gotta be predictable. You have to regulate that because that's unsafe. Just recently talked to somebody who was a rager, and he was scared to death to get into any kind of conversation. And so while we worked with him to trying to take the risk, it was really important for us to encourage her that she needed to regulate herself, because if she didn't, that was unsafe. You're unpredictable, and it's going to be impossible for you guys to have a relationship. 85 to 93%. The next thing is you need not only to be predictable, you need to be open. Total transparency. No secrets. No hidden accounts. No secret chats. Texts. They're open. Whatever you need to see, they're there. My wife would tell you that she didn't know that she's always had a little jealous streak in her. And you can understand why. And so one of the things that was a joke. So you can laugh. But if I'm on Facebook, and I have Facebook for business, but I also have a personal one. She and I have a picture. I put that on there when I was doing my 50th high school reunion just to connect. But while it's there, and I'm looking at it, and she comes behind me, I never minimize it. It's always there. And she says, "Who's that?" I tell her, or I don't know. Apparently we're really good friends. I don't know who we are. But I just open it. If we get a text, I will say, I don't necessarily wait for her to ask me who it is. I initiate it. Hey, that was Billy, or that was Sue, or this was Jan, or whoever the case is. Because openness means openness. Guy comes in, he's trying to build trust with his wife, which is important in this regard. The violated is the one who determines what is needed out of the violator to build the trust, not the other way around. This guy comes in and says, "Okay, I know I cheated on you. Here's what I'll do for you. I will show you this. I will do this. I will do this." And she says, "Well, thank you. I'd like to have all of that. And I also want to have full access to your phone." He says, "No, you're not going to get that." And I said, "You are not going to build trust. You're wasting your time." The violated determines what they need. In the process of building trust, you have to give them credit for what they're doing. Often when there's a violation, there's something that develops that is called a confirmation bias. And you start looking for evidence that this person is not trustworthy. But you have to shift that if you're going to try to restore the relationship. You have to start looking for evidence that says they are trying to build trust. And when they slip up, you give them grace. But again, the person who's trying to rebuild trust doesn't have a whole lot of room for grace. But they have some. So you have to allow that. The third thing that you need is that it has to be fair. When there's been let's talk about affairs, all right, because that's what's so clean cut on this one. When there's an affair or any other kind of secret, the person that's holding the secret is in power. They've got all the control. When it is revealed and trust is trying to be rebuilt, it shifts. The person now who is the violated calls the shots. Now, Why are they calling the shots? In an attempt to get it back to here. A balanced give and take. It's not payback. It is that you had an affair on me. You owe me that Mercedes. No, it's not payback. It is, what do we need to do to get this relationship back into balance? Fairness is really important in a relationship. Janice and I have a pretty traditional view of marriage where I hold certain responsibilities, she holds certain responsibilities. She definitely likes to build a nest. I take care of the outside stuff. It feels very fair for us. It feels balanced. How many times did we have conversations about fairness in our relationship? Many times. Because, especially when the kids were young, because I know that, like she said, I wasn't always present at the house. And she would often say, it just doesn't feel fair. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And so we would have those conversations. What do I need to do in order to get this thing back into balance? I wanted us to have a good relationship. That was very needed. And by the way, if a woman if she works outside the home and she comes back in, women are still doing almost 97% of the work inside the home. That doesn't feel quite fair. And so they need to start stepping up. You talk about resentment, they can start building. I heard one story one time. The man would go off and work. The woman stayed at home, took care of the house. He would come home. He would sit in his chair. Wife would bring him a glass of tea. He'd sit in the chair and watch TV. And when he finished his glass of tea, he would do this. He just rattled the glass. And she came running. And she took care of it. If I did that at my house, I wouldn't be standing here. Because it would not be fair in our relationship. Whew. It needs to be fair. So predictability, openness, and fairness. Definitely needs to be there if you're going to rebuild trust. The last one is that of an overt apology. I know we got a school night too somewhere we can be aware of that. We'll get you out of here at 8:30. Overt apology is in essence saying, I did this behavior and I'm sorry. Not, I'm sorry you took it that way. I'm sorry. What are some other flimsy excuses you guys have heard? I'm sure you guys have heard them all. I'm sorry you shouldn't have felt that. That's a good one.
I'm sorry, but.
I'm sorry, but. Oh my goodness, yes. I often tell people, leave the but out. Anything. I'm sorry, but. Or they'll start using excuses. I am sorry, but you know that whenever you did blah, 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 you just blew it. And even when somebody's trying to go back to the understanding, the insight part, where they are really trying to let the other person know they get it, boy, I've had to just stop them in mid-sentence whenever they start going, I am really sorry that I did this. I know it made you feel blah, blah, blah. I was only trying to, and then they go on and try to explain what's going on. And I go, whoa, just put a period on that and leave it. Well, don't I get to say my part? No, not yet. Let's just start with this one. You said you're sorry. You understand her. And even some of the nonverbal stuff, lean forward. Let them hold their hand. Let them look at you in the eye. That remorse needs to be there, or they'll never believe you will. So, again, the stations of forgiveness. You do one, and you may have to do another one. And this is another aspect that is really hard for the perpetrator or for the violator, and that is the violator always can get over it quicker and wants to get over it quicker than the violator. And that frustrates the violator because they say, we already dealt with that. Do we have to do that again? Can't you just get over it? And the question is, what if you do that and you're trying to rebuild trust, you just caused this person to take a step away from forgiveness. The less defensive you are, the more cooperative you are, the more understanding you are, even when they keep bringing it up, the more you're allowing this person to move towards forgiveness. Now, are there situations where somebody is obsessing too much? Yes, but those are other issues we're not going to deal here. But this is basically what you have to go through in order to forgiveness. Does that make sense? That is much more of a process-oriented and much more understanding than you just gotta forgive. Just do it. Figure it out. What kind of questions do you have about that?
So what do you do when there's only one side willing to forgive or be forgiven? It's one side.
I'm not quite sure I understand.
So in a relationship, you have a person that's wanting to work on a relationship, the other is not.
Right?
And there doesn't feel like there's trust or forgiveness there. Only one seems to be working on it.
Right.
Is there hope for that? Is there a part of this that you can work through on your own?
I would probably start off with the fact that you go back to the pain and peace cycle. I would get that person in their peace cycle and start behaving that way regardless of what the other person is doing. And if they are the violator, I would definitely have them at least do their part in letting that person know that they get it, they understand it. If they're the one that's got violated and the violator doesn't want to work on it, that person is either going to be trustworthy or not. You cannot make them trustworthy. But that person who is willing to work on it, and they were the one who was violated, again, they need to find the truth. They need to stay in their peace cycle and just do a lot of praying that maybe this person is going to change. So soften their heart. What else?
You said it wasn't linear. Have you seen anything, or does it depend on the type of person that's been violated, or have you just seen a general, like, this one starts, if you start here, it works better more often? Does that make sense? Like,
is there a station that if you start here, it's a really good start?
Yeah, or
That's
like
where you want
the
to start?
best, I guess.
Well, it would be on the inside. Definitely on the inside. Where if I violated you, I would come to you and I would let you know in so many words, I get it. I did this. Even if I'm guessing, I'm going to say it might have made you feel right. And what I have found out is if I miss that, if I don't get it right, you're going to correct it. I know it must have made you feel worthless. And then I'll probably bounce up over an apology. I'm sorry. I almost always start there. Then the next question is, what can I do to rebuild the trust? So I might go to the third stage. That second one, when it comes to understanding, it might not happen for a while. Because the person who was violated might not be ready for it. They don't want to understand that making sense, Gary? Any questions?
What's a good way to approach a couple that there are issues? Not my relationship, but if there is a couple that is having issues, how would you approach them in a way that, I mean, you know some stuff and you would like to get them help without saying, you guys just need to go to counseling? I mean, what's the best way to kind of
And you don't want them to get into counseling?
do what?
You don't want them to get into counseling?
No, I want them to, but how do you tell them to?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, of course, the relationship that you have with them will determine how much leverage you're gonna have on whatever you say. You know, there's no magic bullet on that. But just to say, you know, it's worth working on. Don't give up. But everybody needs help at one time or another, and there's some resources that can help you. You know, just don't give up. But ask for help. And sometimes it's just pride. They don't want to ask for help. I'd probably say something like, whatever help you get, no matter how much it's going to cost, it's going to be better than it. It's going to be less expensive. If there are kids involved, then you understand the effects of that. There's just a whole lot of research out there about the effects of kids on divorce. And some of you come from divorce, and you know how messed up you are. And you don't want that to happen to you. There's no real. I think you just be compassionate. Sometimes, if you, what we have found, it's interesting with the intensives, and in my private practice, when the man says, let's go get counseling, they go. If the woman says, let's go get counseling, it's about a 50-50 shot. If the woman has said, let's go get counseling, and then finally the man goes and says, okay, let's get counseling, that's not a good thing either. So the sooner you can get, especially the man on board, I have found that's better.
What would you say to young couples that are dating but not yet married? Is there a relationship indicator that you could give? Because I mean, that's what we're telling our kids now.
Yeah.
Things to, hazards to look for.
Mm-hmm.
Positive signs, negative signs. I'm just curious if you had any insight on that.
There is, give you two resources, I think. One, Garrett, you may have it. Do you do the Prepare Enrichment? You know what that is? Prepare-Enrich. It is an assessment that you can give couples that takes a snapshot of their relationship as regards to their satisfaction with and their agreement on conflict resolution, communication, family and friends, sexual relationship, finances, religion, role expectations, all that type of stuff. It deals with family or a family map, and then a couple map, got a personality profile in it, it's got a stress indicator. It's probably the best assessment that you can get out there. It can be for couples too, but it was built initially just for premarital. The other thing I would suggest is that there are some online classes that you can take that they might be interested in. The Parrots have another assessment, and they do some classes. I've got some online that you could do, but to get as much reading. There's a great book by John Gottman. It's a secular book that says 7 principles that make marriage work. Just throw resources if they're willing to study. I know whenever I was considering getting married, I started reading not marriage books, but How to Be a Man. I read Man of Steel and Velvet. It was one of the things I wanted to do. So again, I'd emphasize the fact that they needed to individually just be the person they need to be and find ways to improve themselves. This pain and peace cycle. It's a powerful thing, but what I found out with pre-marriage, it depends on the age, but if they're really young, their glasses are so rose-colored, they don't see anything but good, but if they're older, and they've been through some difficult relationships, this information that I've given you about pain and peace really speaks to them. They can see it. I know that probably a roundabout way, but Prepare and Rich is a really good profile. Great assessment. And there's a self-learning module that you can take. It's got discs and everything, so you don't have to go through their in-person training. Did that answer?